Hey guys, today we're going to do a self-help book tier list. We're going to go through all the books that I've read. I've read quite a bit, even some that I haven't read fully yet. I'll go through them, rank them in different order. I've got the rankings as the best is must read right now, and then it goes must buy, then get around to it, meh, and don't buy. So let's get into it. So I'm also going to add in another part of this tier list in the bottom left-hand corner or somewhere on screen. I'll put in what kind of area or what kind of level of self-development, of self-help this caters towards. So whether it's basic, intermediate, or advanced, and some can have a in between those three levels. Also, a book could appeal to all three levels. So that'll be an extra way so that if you're at a certain level, help you gauge what books to get, what ones might not apply to you. First, we're going to start out with The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. This book would basically be in the starter kit to self-help. This book is really interesting. It's really good into getting you into an entrepreneurial mindset. What I've gotten out of it over time has been just that shift in mindset to work more on being a business owner rather than a worker, and it sort of sets you up really well with that sort of foundation of what it means to be an entrepreneur. This book appeals more to the success in money. It doesn't do like whole life success. Some of the books later down the track will get more interesting than this sort of basic book, and they'll also go more in depth with just a broad philosophy of how to look at life. But I started self-improvement through the lens of trying to earn money and trying to get some success. So a lot of these books will cater towards that. The type of books that have been set up here are going to be starting out basic and they're going to go more advanced as we go through. But yeah, 4-Hour Workweek, really great. The idea of the new rich is really interesting here. So a lot of the ideas in the book, and there's a lot of little tiny resources which might be still outdated because it is an older book, but they're still useful, and you can look up modern ways of doing things in it. So I would say it's definitely worth a read. Now, where would I put this on the tier list? I would put 4-Hour Workweek at a get around to it tier, which is equivalent to like a B tier. I think that you'd get around to it because it is something that isn't really necessary, but it is something that can help, especially if you're that beginner level, and especially if you're used to being a worker and you're not so familiar with what it means to be an entrepreneur or time value of money and some of those more basic business success concepts. Next book is Tools of Titans, also by Tim Ferriss. It's less of a narrative book that goes from start to finish, but more of a reference guide or index of different people that Tim Ferriss has interviewed. Tim Ferriss, the author, by the way, is a successful investor, business owner, and he does a very successful podcast where he interviews interesting people. This book is great to have because you can refer back to it at different points. And if there's people you know in the industry, like Tony Robbins or Wim Hof or different interesting people, they'd probably be in this book. And a lot of lesser known names are also in this book as well. I think it's great to have in your arsenal just to pull out when you need it occasionally. Look up some people, look up some interesting facts about them or interesting things that are around their character or what their ideas. I think it's a really good introductory point to self-improvement and all the different personalities of people that are in the industry. I'd say I got a lot out of this at the start, and I think people at the beginner level will get a lot out of it. I would put Tools of Titans also at the get around to it area. It's not quite a must buy because it's not something you have to have gotten into at some point. It's get around to it because it's great to have in your tool belt. That's why it's called Tools of Titans, but it's not 100% necessary to have. Okay, some of the books I'm going to be putting in there are audiobooks that I've listened to. I've listened to a lot of different books, so I'm not going to always have physical copies of them. Sometimes if a book is really good, I'll have the physical copy and an ebook, or I'll have the digital copy of it. I highly encourage people who struggle to get into reading books, just get the audiobook. It doesn't really matter. I especially was tossing up between getting an audiobook or getting the physical book. Physical book is better, But I think as long as you're consuming it, as long as you're reading the book, as long as you're getting the information to you, if it's a really good book and you want to get more out of it and you feel that it's really worth it, you should go and get the physical book. So a lot of the times it'll be up to what you think the book will suit more. Will it suit reading it and paying a lot of attention to it, or is it more something that you could listen to like a podcast while you're driving or something like that? Now the book we're going to look at is This is Marketing by Seth Godin. A great book for marketing because it says it in the title. It is a book about marketing. The main takeaway I got out of it, and the one thing I can reflect back on that really helped me, was the mindset around looking at consumers as friends, maybe as consumers, but more as people. So seeing more the human side of marketing. And I found it really, really effective, really interesting. The ideas are more foundational. They're not really nuanced, or they aren't the most amazing ideas. But, the idea of giving away things for free, trialing things, testing the market first is a really key business point. And this is a key business book. So where would I place This is Marketing by Seth Godin? I would place it, I'll put it in a meh tier. It's okay. There's a lot of information out there on the internet which is probably achieves what this book does a lot easier. It's something you could get around to, I guess, but it's not really necessary. I'll put it in a meh because it's okay. It's alright. Okay, the next book we're doing is Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within. I don't have the Awaken the Giant Within copy because I've loaned it out to my mum. So I just got his previous book, which was Unlimited Power, as a little placeholder. Yeah, Tony Robbins is amazing, dude. He's a great guy. He's genuine. You may question yourself, is the smile real? It's so wide. How could it be real? How could his energy and the way he is, and the way he comes across on camera be genuine? Because so many people act fake. We're so used to so much marketing where it's all really fake and touched up, but he's the OG. I think he is 100% genuine. I look forward to meeting him one day, but he's a great guy. And this is a book where anybody can get value from it. Tony Robbins is someone who you can get value from no matter what level you are, because he really is the king of the industry. He's the king of self-help for a reason. He's really up there with things. He really knows what he's talking about. And I think the book reflects it. The book and a lot of his content is mainly oriented towards helping people at that basic level, but you can still extract things at that intermediate and advanced level, and reading through it again and again brings you new insights. And that's why I would put Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within at a must read right now. If you haven't read it, or you haven't watched Tony Robbins' I'm Not Your Guru on Netflix, please do as soon as possible. Basically, get it to it right now. I think that his stuff is amazing. I think that he's an awesome dude. Please, it's so awesome. Please get around to it. There's so much value in what he has to say. And you may not recognize it now, even if you're at that basic level. His stuff will be great. It'll be good. Maybe at the intermediate, you'll miss it. With the advanced, you'll come back to it and you really say, wow, okay, there's a lot of gems. I can't talk highly enough about Tony Robbins and Awaken the Giant Within. Me and a lot of people in the self-improvement world have a lot of love for Tony. A little crush on him. Okay, the next book is Tao of Seneca. So this is a Stoicism book. If you haven't heard of Stoicism, it's a ancient ancient Italian philosophy. It came from Seneca and it comes from Marcus Aurelius. Another book that's classic for Stoicism is Meditations. I read through the audiobook of the Tao of Seneca. I think it only comes in the audiobook version. I'm sure you can get some kind of physical version, but the audiobook is great, produced by Tim Ferriss, because he has a bit of a passion for Stoicism. And so the Stoic philosophy is really interesting. And what a lot of self-help does at the start, particularly, is honing in and refining and hitting home the idea of taking responsibility for your life. And I think if you're a person who is starting self-improvement, you already have taken responsibility to a certain extent. You're above the average person in terms of taking responsibility for your life if you're doing some kind of self-improvement. And hopefully over the time, everyone starts being passionate and really taking responsibility for their life, growing in their personal power and not relinquishing it and giving it away to others. But yeah, Stoicism is a great introduction to taking responsibility. It is a philosophy which hones in and refines that idea. It really makes you think about working on your reactions to situations and things in your life, maybe to an extreme extent, and maybe you need to have a bit of that extreme extent at the start at least, to then really start taking control of your life and getting a better life and improving your life. Stoicism is a great starting point. I think you have to get around to it at some point. That's why I would put the Tao of Seneca at a must buy, because it has to be something you've interacted with at some point. It is a must buy. The next book we're going to go to is Creativity by John Cleese. John Cleese is part of the prior Monty Python group, and this is a great little book. It's quite small. It's a tiny little one, and I love the little, there's little lemurs at the front of it. They're very cute. I really love lemurs. Yeah, it's a small book, but it packs a punch. It is great. It's really, really good. It really goes into the creative process in a genuine way from a very talented comedy writer. It obviously is great for creative writing, but it can extend to the rest of creativity. This one might be a little bit hard to find, but it is a great book. I initially listened to this on an audiobook, and I felt compelled to buy the original book because it was that good. It was really, really good, and I want to pay a little more attention to it and read the details of it. All right, I'll put John Cleese's Creativity in a must-buy because creativity is such a huge part of our lives. It is, I would say, a spiritual part of our lives in that creativity expresses what it means to be human rather than what it means to be a machine or an animal. I think we are largely in three different levels in life. We're either at this animal level, where we're acting like an animal, or we're acting like a machine, or we're acting creatively. And you can kind of mix that creativity with that spirituality in a way. Regardless of what you think about whether God or that kind of spiritual sense, at least our highest sense of what it means to be human is our creativity. And I hope this book helps you expand that. Yeah, so definitely get around to this. Put in the must buy. Okay, the next book is The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Might have butchered that name, I don't know. This is another little short book, but it does pack a lot of a punch as well. I would say this is an original suggestion by Tony Robbins. And if he suggests a book, I think you should read it. It is a great book, this one. Came to me at a key point, and a little risky to say recommending this to beginners, but I say it could be read by beginners. I got a lot out of it by being at an intermediate level or more an advanced level when I read it. I would say this book does a lot for you because there's this whole mainstream mindset around psychology and around therapy talking about trauma. And I think we're at a pretty good level with recognizing there's such thing as trauma and recognizing that it extends to areas such as smaller things. I think before, and I think a lot of our parents or like older sort of mindsets were that trauma was a thing that was only really serious. And I think this book helps you to take responsibility for that trauma. There's often this mindset around trauma in mainstream culture is to just say that I've got this trauma and trying to deal with it, but not saying, okay, I had part in these things. Going back to the Tao of Seneca and the Stoicism, it is all about your reaction to things. And the Four Agreements adds upon that by basically stating that you agreed to the things people have said about you. You have agreed to the things that have happened to you to some extent. There's a bitter pill to swallow, just like in the Matrix movie. The red pill or the blue pill, you want to take the red pill, the one that wakes you up to the harsh reality. It is a better thing to do in the long term. So this book, The Four Agreements, is a lot of value in it, being a small book. And the Four Agreements themselves, it goes into the different sort of pillars and agreements with yourself that build a firm foundation for life. Some of it is basically taking core concepts that are known for centuries, but taking them from a different point of view. And it's really important. So my dad used to talk about the idea of balance a lot, of moderation. And as I've grown, I've found a lot more appreciation and understanding of what it means to have balance in things. And that way, through learning from different points of view, seeing things from others' perspectives, I've met the things of my past, the ideas that my family has given in a new light and with new understanding and new respect. It allowed me to truly understand what my father was trying to say. And I think this book helps do that with a lot of these core concepts that are around in culture. And a lot of other self-improvement books do that as well. They give us a new perspective on the same thing so that we can understand it and that we can actually integrate it and believe it and connect more with it. And that way it can really improve our lives. So where would I put the 4 agreements on this list? I would say I would put the 4 agreements in the must-buy category. I don't think you need to get to it straight away right now. It's a must-have and that you always find value from it, or that it's super powerful. I think it is a great book, a really good book, and I think you should read it at some point. So you should buy it. You don't have to read it right now, but just have it there, and you can always refer back to it. Okay, this is New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. Now, what do I think about this book? I think this is poo-poo garbage. I think I would not recommend buying this book. I would not recommend getting around to it. I think that I would put this book straight in the don't buy list. Let me explain. A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle is a very popular spiritual book. And I tend to not gravitate towards the most spiritual books, even though I've looked through a lot of the spirituality and New Age areas in my time. And I think it can be useful in terms of an introduction to spirituality, but I don't believe Eckhart Tolle is a genuine person. He doesn't give off good vibes. He doesn't seem like a genuine person by his reactions and the way he conducts himself. And he doesn't seem to care or put efforts towards helping people in a genuine, effective, true, honest way. And even just him, that's him alone. But the actual book itself goes a lot into this concept of the ego. And you'll probably hear this a lot if you're getting into self-improvement. You may already be very, very familiar with the idea from psychology, but the concept of the ego is that you've got this other side of yourself in a way, this idea of this ego, which are other ways of saying it. It's the lower self, the shadow self. Yeah, this book calls it the ego. Now, those are great ideas, but the problem is that out of weakness, you are splitting it from yourself. You're saying it's my other self or the ego. You're separating your personal identity from it. And in that way, you are stripping yourself of power to influence it. When you separate yourself from something, you basically have less influence over it, as if it was you. You have most influence over yourself, and then comes secondary to the people closest to you, the things closest to you, and so forth, on and on and on. But I understand why that happens. I understand why people separate themselves, but it's out of weakness. It is out of fear, and it is out of not seeing yourself as great as you could be. And hey, some people may want to go through that, and I certainly did that at some point. I read this book, but I don't recommend it. I don't think in the long term it's a good idea. I think that it is a mistake. It's a mistake you may need to learn from, but I wouldn't recommend it. I would say that I would put this and the don't read this book at all. Okay, next book is Power versus Force by David R. Hawkins. Now, this is a really interesting book, a really great book. It is great for that sort of beginner level stage. And this is a more holistic, more philosophical book. And it talks about the idea of power and the idea of force and differentiating those two terms, those two ideas. I think what it means to be powerful often in culture is seen as a bad thing. That's not true. Power or influence aren't bad things. Manipulation, control, force are bad things. And it's very important to differentiate between power and force. That's why this book is so crucial. One of the reasons. There are actually many other reasons why this book is super crucial and that is really, really valuable. It does introduce the idea of spectral, dual, or levels way of seeing things. They'll go into a book we'll touch upon later. But this book also has some things which you need an open mind to read, maybe not agree with, maybe do, look at, and then go forth from there. I just read this, the Mother Teresa read this book. Wow. The point of blurbs. But yeah, it's a great book. I would highly recommend it. It also introduces the idea of non-linear dynamics, which is a whole thing I think I need a separate video to explain or talk about. But a lot of value in it. Great book. Where would I put Power versus Force? I would put Power versus Force in a must-buy. Just because you don't get too much value out of it when you're at that advanced level, but it is something you definitely want to have in your tool shelf, so to speak, because it has a lot of things you can refer back to later on, and is very, very crucial for beginner and very crucial to have read at some point. So that's why I put it in a must buy. All right, next book is Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Now, I was a little disappointed with this book because I've heard of this Zen Buddhism concept of beginner's mind, and I wanted to research it more, understand it a lot more, go into it, get in the nitty gritty. Whereas this book touches upon it to some extent, but it doesn't really go into the nitty gritty of it. It doesn't really expand upon what does it mean, why do people have beginner's mind. It was alright. It does go into more of that sort of religious aspect of Buddhism, which I find I don't get a lot of value in the rituals of religions, the rituals of Buddhism, the rituals of Hinduism. I don't find I get a lot of value out of those things. I'm purely sort of for growth and self-development. I've tried many different things. I've looked into many different corners, and there are plenty of things that I've done, spent a lot of time on, and disregarded because they haven't helped me. And this is a book that touches upon a lot of things which don't really help that much. It is interesting to learn about beginner's mind, but I would put this book in a don't buy, just because it is not necessary. It's not even a get around to it at some point. I would learn about Buddhism, I'd learn about Zen Buddhism, I'd learn about beginner's mind through Tao, or the Tao Te Ching, which is like a philosophy or religion originating in China that goes into a lot of the ideas of beginner's mind, and also just searching on beginner's mind, the idea on YouTube. Alright, so we went through Power versus Force, and now we're going to go on to Levels of Energy by Frederick Dodson. Frederick Dodson is a great author. Actually, he coached me for a while and helped me massively. All of his books are great, and I have a lot of books later on this list. I've read a lot from him. He has been great. I got recommended Levels of Energy by a YouTube video by Owen Cook, and I went with the recommendation, and wow, this book is crazy. This book is like pretty amazing. It does teach about the idea of a levels system of thinking. So you know how there's these religious types who are very much black and white in the terms of their morality. One thing's good, another thing's bad. It's very clear. There's two things, either a good thing or a bad thing. Well, Levels of Energy goes into more depth with that. It combines this more grey way of thinking, which is, you know, this atheistic way, they'd say, which is contrast with the religious sort of way, where you think of more things as a spectrum, right? The ideas of good and bad aren't really apparent. It's more contextual based, that kind of idea. Where Levels of Energy basically combines the spectral and the dualistic way of thinking. So one to two, there's only two things, and there are multiple things together. So you have levels of good and levels of bad, and it goes on a sliding scale. Like you would think of cold and hot. There's cold, and then there's hot. There's also degrees on that scale. And it really goes into depth, introduces a lot of different people, ideas, things, expands your mind massively. It gives you a point of view and a way of looking at the world that's really interesting. That is like spectacular. It's so interesting, and it really allows you to get to that next level. It allows you to go into that intermediate level of thinking in terms of the progression of self-improvement. I've read the ebook of this many times. Great book. I'd put it up in the must read right now. It's something you can get value out of no matter what level you're at. So highly recommended. Intimacy by Osho. Okay, Osho is a bit of an interesting character. Osho, if you're not aware, was a cult leader. Now, I think you got to know I've got an open mind, and I think the way you're able to get from basic to advanced level of self-improvement is you have to have an open mind. And an open mind is something you can cultivate. You can want to go into nooks and crannies and look at interesting ideas and look at things less with a extreme mindset, over time. But yes, Intimacy by Osho, great, really interesting book. It certainly has a arrogant way of viewing life, but it provides a lot of value about how you see relationships. So this is a book that's more oriented towards relationships, but extends basically through a whole life philosophy. Now, how would I rate this book? I would put this book at a get around to it. I think it's something that you could read and get around to it. I think it's alright. It gives you value. It definitely introduces you to interesting concepts and ideas. It is not as practical as it could be, but it's very much a mindset shifter. It can give you a lot of realizations. But it's not something you need at all, but it's something that's really interesting and that you could get around to. Alright, the next book is The Presence Process. Now, I got recommended by Julian LeBlanc about this book through a program. It was really interesting, really good book. It wasn't groundbreaking. It introduced a lot of things that I already knew. But if you were more at that basic level, I think it would introduce a lot and could really, really help you. It is more of the idea of, as it says, the presence process of finding presence and calming your mind, getting to a good place. I would put the presence process in a get around to it as well. I would say that it is something you don't necessarily need to read, but it is something that would be really good to get around to. And if you're basic level, it would be really good to read. But anything past that, and anything, even if you're an intermediate, you wouldn't get too much value from it. No, it's not something I would go back to currently. Okay, next book is The Open Focus Brain by Les Fleming and Gin Robbins. This is an awesome book. It's really interesting. If I break it down, open focus brain goes into the idea of narrow focus and an open focus. So this is very much on a meta level of self-improvement, looking at how you focus, and different types of focus. Because we're constantly focusing on things, and we constantly have a certain type or way of focusing on ideas. I would put it into the idea of trying really hard and observing or seeing the full picture. Narrow focus is very like object small focus. Open focus is seeing the whole picture frame. We often get into open focus when we look at large sceneries. It gets us a lot into that positive, peaceful way of feeling. We often feel very expanded and open. The open focus brain basically goes into how to train yourself into going from narrow to open focus. And it is a bit of a convoluted book, and it is a book that can cause you to, ironically, try hard and then narrowly focus on achieving an open focus. I've got companion audios that I'm going to release to help through this, because I certainly got really challenged by it until I took the time to analyze the book and really rephrase it and look from it from different points of view to help connect with how to achieve open focus. Because it is a different sort of state of being almost. It is a different sort of feeling. When you go from a narrow focus to an open focus, it is like an opening. And it's really interesting. So I'll go more into that in the program. If you're really interested in that, write in the comments that you would like that, and I'll release it sometime this year. But Open Focus Brain is a crucial book, really, really good book. I'll put it straight up into the must read right now. I think you definitely should get up to it, even though it is more intermediate, advanced level kind of material, because when you're at that basic level, I think you tend to narrow focus on a lot of things. You tend to try really hard at everything. This book can be really challenging and really cause you to strain a little bit more, but I would highly, highly recommend it. Okay, Prosperity Consciousness. This is another Fred book that I highly recommend. Really, really good about money and the mindset around money and the idea, different ways of thinking about money and business success. Not too much to say about this. Great book. Really introduces some really interesting ideas past just money, but thinking about the world. Fred is great, really interesting as usual. Although it is a good book, I don't think it is something you have to have read, but I would say you should get around to it because it's a really great book and I highly recommend it. Okay, this goes with all of Fred's other books. He has that I've read, I would put them all in the get around to it tier. Yeah, Fred's great. Personally coached me. Super happy with the coaching. I'll make a little video about it later. If anyone's interested, if people are interested, I think they will be. My time with it. Be Here Right Now is the next book. It is a very interesting book, as you can probably see from the front of it. It is very interesting, very strange. If you can't tell, this was written by someone who did DMT and LSD for a while. Super spiritual, super really interesting read, really baffling kind of ideas. I don't think much of it is true, much of it is very useful, but it is certainly a very interesting read, and it is something you definitely have to have an open mind to read and to take seriously and genuinely want to learn from it. But saying that, I didn't learn much from it. I truly considered the ideas, and at the time I thought it was something I needed to take seriously. I tried some of the things out, but I slowly grew past it, and eventually phased the whole thing out from being relevant to me. I'm sure there's some things in there which are quite interesting, and I wouldn't say it rules it out completely of having any value, but I would put Be Here Right Now in a don't buy. It is one of those hippie spiritual books which tend to get you to avoid taking full responsibility of life and fully getting involved in the game of life, so to speak, desires and getting them, achieving and enjoying things, and what it means to be a person. I think it really is something that trying to tap out of that a little bit. And that tends to be the idea of taking drugs like LSD, ayahuasca, those things. They can have a use and they have a place in some respect, but I don't see them often doing too much good, really. So I would put this in a don't buy. The next book, trilogy. That's a trilogy. So it's pretty intense, pretty immense. I'm trying not to rhyme, I swear. Conversations with God. The Conversations with God trilogy. I can only have book 1, 2, and 3, hard copy, physical. But the first book is loaned down to my girlfriend, and I have book 3 here. Now these books are awesome. These books are great. They are challenging, mind you, and they are more advanced books. But if you really have the aptitude, if you really are able to, you can read them at a basic intermediate level, but it will be difficult. It was very difficult to take all of the ideas seriously, genuinely consider all of them, genuinely consider the whole book, the whole idea of the book. I don't want to go too much into it, but it's about God, but it's also more about life. And, it's one where you have to say, okay, I'm going to take it with a grain of salt in terms of my belief in it, my subscribing to it, but I'm going to genuinely consider all of the ideas and take the book seriously. And if you do, you're going to get massive value out of it. Huge amount of value in this book trilogy. I highly recommend it. I'd say I put it in the must-read right now tier. I think you should read it right now. I think everyone should. It might be hard, it might be difficult, but you really should. You should definitely get it. At least buy it, at least get around to it, and have it as something which you want to get to. Maybe you know that you should get around to it, but you don't because of how it feels, the idea of God, the idea of talking with God. It can be very inflammatory, it can be very crazy, it can be very different, but I would highly, highly, highly recommend reading the book trilogy, reading the Conversation with God trilogy. Okay, now we're going to get into books that I haven't fully completed for whatever reason. How One More by Ed Milet. Ed Milet, a great guy, really, really good. Good for the basic intermediate level. I've lost interest and care to a lot of the concepts. I'm sure they help people to some extent as I've sort of grown. So I reckon they'll be probably great, but I can't really comment too much on how helpful they are to people because I haven't really found much interest in it. But yeah, great guy, great things. I thought he was good. I would put it in a get around to it, just because it doesn't really appeal to me much at the level I'm at the advanced level. Just get around to it, you'll be right. 12 Rules for Life. I got a physical copy of this and I still didn't finish it. Look, Jordan Peterson's a great guy. I listened to some podcasts with him and they were really interesting. I went to one of his live shows a long time ago when he came to my hometown of Adelaide, South Australia. And yeah, really interesting. Good core concepts, great for a beginner. Also probably going to be in the self-help starter pack with all the other books. I would probably put 12 Rules for Life, get round to it too. Again, I haven't had enough value to finish it. I think I got round to it maybe too late. I think if I maybe had a bit more desperation and I was more at that basic level, it'd be really good for me. But good concepts, core concepts, good things to understand, but not too relevant at that more intermediate advanced level. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The best thing I got out of this was the idea of interdependence. Not being dependent, not being independent, but being interdependent. So being your own person, but ironically, also being dependent on other people and connected with other people. I think many people need to understand truthfully and honestly that concept. Really take some time to apply it to areas of their lives and the way they think about relationships, the way they think about business, the way they think about everything. I've gotten that, but nothing else from this. It's a bit of a thick, dense book. It has lost a bit of relevancy to me later on. I might pick it up. I might read it at some point, but lost a lot of interest for me. So I'll probably put 7 Habits of Highly Effective People also in the get around to it here. Human Magnet Syndrome. I've read this book in ebook form. I don't have the physical copy. I would put this book in a meh. The idea of human magnets is that, say like you're in a relationship, you split up for the problems in the relationship and you come back to another different person, you got the same problems. It keeps happening to you. That's the idea of human magnet syndrome. The idea of the Oedipus complex is not quite accurate. It's more that you have wounds in your childhood. You try and find partners and attempt to heal those wounds. Because intimate relationships are the strongest and best things in our lives for helping us and healing us. When you have a deep, intimate connection with a partner, it's the most rewarding thing ever in life. And it's the thing that gives you the most growth. When I was a good little Christian boy, people would talk to me as a concept of that. You have a triangle where it's you and your partner. And as you grow closer to God together. And that's sort of the ideal, right, for those kinds of Christian relationships. That's beautiful, and I think that is 100% true, regardless of whether you're a religious affiliation. I think as you grow in intimacy and connection, and you grow in your relationship, you grow closer to whatever the idea of God would be. The universe, the field, the quantum, field, whatever you'd call the intelligence, the thing that guides, that makes you feel like you're guided in your life by something greater than yourself. Any of that, creativity, all those kinds of things, connects you with those in a relationship. But back to the idea of human magnet syndrome, the book itself was interesting. I already knew about the concept. If you don't know about the concept, it can be really great. But you can also get information about that concept through other sources. You can just search it up, and you don't need the whole book. And I don't think the whole book will really help you much. It also goes into the idea of generational trauma and the origins of trauma through that. But I wouldn't recommend buying it. It's okay. It's not a don't buy, but it's a meh. It's alright. Next we have I Am That. There's another book I haven't quite gotten around to finishing. This book I haven't finished it because I just haven't had the time to get around to it yet. It's something that I probably will read over a long period of time because it has very impactful ideas, very strong ideas, different, very interesting way of viewing things, and there's more of that sort of spiritual Indian sort of shamanism kind of realm. This one not much in a bad way, but in a way that I want to actually genuinely look at this because it's very much removed from the idea of religious things or things that require belief without much awareness of how it helps, right, or how it packs, more ritualistic rather than truly helpful. But this is removed from that, right? It is a really interesting book that I've already got a lot of value out of, but it's something that takes a slow, methodical read to, and it's something you can get around to later at later points. And for that reason, I would put it at get around to it level. Joseph Campbell, Hero with 1,000 Faces. Really interesting book about understanding story. It goes into a lot of very mystical core concepts based on religion and multi-religious study, which is really interesting, really good. It doesn't appeal to me much because it's more towards that basic intermediate kind of level of self-improvement. A lot of those ideas become boring and take a lot of time to get the point of this book. It's probably something I'll get around to at a later date at some point, but it is not massively impactful, so I put it to get around to it. Alright, the Flow State by Frederick Dodson. A lot of Fred's books tend to be very much calls to action, a lot of exercise and tasks in them. That's a big problem with them. I'd rather them actually charge a lot more and not have these things in books and have them as products, because you don't really have that same, when you only pay like $16 or something, or $20 or 25 or whatever, you don't have much incentive to do tasks which may be difficult or may require a lot of effort or investment. I'd much rather them be more expensive, but that's up to him. It's his choices about things. So I haven't got around to doing much of the exercises, and I think there's certain concepts in it which are good, certain ones which are okay. I think he's missing a lot of key concepts on the flow state and really understanding how to trigger it correctly and how not to. So I'll put it in a meh for now. Yeah, it could go up to a get around to it, but it's okay. Yeah. So the reality creation and manifestation. I would put this in a get around to it. Like if you have never sort of interacted with these kinds of ideas about manifestation, about reality creation, and I thought it was really good about the idea of 8-week process. It's a very dense book, a lot of very thick, but if you have the ability to get around to it, do. Yeah. Course in Miracles. This is a really interesting book. Very challenging ideas, very interesting. Not massive amounts of value out of it. I feel like it tends to be a little bit of a distraction, but it can definitely offer people at that in beginning intermediate some good value. You can get a lot out of it. If you've watched this video, you've been introduced to all these good books. Make sure you get through the list, and I don't think this will be too relevant if you do, but it could be something you could sink your curious teeth into, right? I think it would be a very interesting read if you haven't read it the first time. Well, so where would I rank Course in Miracles? I would put it at a meh. You can get around to it, you don't have to. The Laws of Human Nature. It's very much like Joseph Campbell's Hero with 1,000 Faces, and that it tells a lot of stories. I think it's maybe narrated by a similar person. I'm not sure, but it is really interesting. It's by Robert Greene, and it goes into different examples and then the sort of self-improvement out of that historical example. I haven't finished it because a lot of it is more like basic intermediate level and doesn't go much past there, but it does it very well, and it's very interesting, sort of a more narrative read. A damn thick book. It is a big boy too. It's quite it stands out though. The logo of it, look of it stands out, and I'd say it's a very basic level book, but I would put it in the get around to it. If you're a basic, just getting into it, I think you'd find a lot of value. You'd really find it really interesting, but it's not massive and it's not groundbreaking. The final book is Fred Dodson's relatively new book, You Can Heal Anyone. Pretty ostentatious, pretty amazing proposition. A really, really great book, really, really interesting. The basis of where he's coming from in the book and where the book is coming from, maybe not the application of it, but a lot of the general ideas are really interesting. I'm probably going to use it for, I'm glad that I read this, very glad. And I'm almost finished it, but I haven't quite finished it yet. But I would say it's a really, really interesting book. It might be a little like woo-woo at times, but if you stick around with me and what I'm doing in this next couple of years, maybe even this next year, you'll see how I've applied a lot of the ideas from it, and in a way that I think makes more sense, in a way that is closer to what is true. It is a great book that inspired me. So, where would I put it on the list? Where would I put the final book on the list? I would put it in a must-buy, because it's something would be really interesting to get around to. It's definitely for more an open-minded person, more of that advanced level, but it is something that is really interesting, and it is something that might be interesting to see what people make out of it, what you could make out of it if you want to go down the route of helping people yourself. So this is the tier list. I'm very happy with it. They're not ranked within the tier. It's a little a little too complicated, but they're certainly looking at like the must read right now, looking at the must buy. They are fantastic. They're amazing, those books. They are so good. I'm really happy with all of them in the must read right now and the must buy. I'm really happy with them. They're all amazing books. Please get around to buying them. I have affiliate links down below if you want to support me and buy them off Amazon. You may as well help me out at the same time. I think it'd be really nice. And yeah, for the US and Australia. Look forward to more of me in 2023. I'm starting to upload more videos and look forward to it. Hopefully it's a lot of fun. Hopefully really enjoy, and hopefully I make a huge impact on you. I hope that through you I can make a huge impact on the world and improve the world we both live in, and it can be, really nice and a lot of fun times and happy times. Yay. Bye.